Hello. Thank you for joining me, especially you, Jan Berkman. I think that's how to pronounce your name. This man made a video. This video right here, a letter to America. I reacted to that, and I saw he responded to my reaction, which I'm pretty excited about. I'm pretty excited to react to it. I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest, because I hate hearing my own voice. I think he's going to play... Yeah, I can see some clips of myself in here, so I think I'm going to have to suffer through listening to my own voice, which is horrible. No one should have to suffer through that, but I will, because this topic is very important. And not only will I have to suffer through listening to my own voice, but, like, I have to suffer through listening to myself speak, which I don't know about you, but I don't know why, but when I listen to myself talk about stuff like this, I'm always like, wait, I hope I didn't say anything stupid. I don't remember. And not my thoughts don't always translate into my words correctly. Anyway, okay, I'm going to stop being a scared little wuss. I'm just going to react to it because it's important and I appreciate him responding. So let's do it.
Hi, Jan from Germany.
Oh, I guess I should say, I mean, if you didn't watch the last video, the letter to America was about fascism. You know, it was a warning, essentially. It was, I mean, you should probably go watch it. You don't have to watch my reaction because he's going to play clips from it anyway. But his video was a warning to America, like, hey, you're going down a bad path, okay? All right, that was as fast a summary as I could give.
So it was brought to my attention that Ryan was an American YouTuber who does a lot of content on Germany, had reacted to my reading.
But am I really American or am I secretly Canadian? Putting on an American accent. I'm American.
Of the open letter that I produced together with the German grannies against the far right for the US. And it was an interesting reaction, especially because as an outsider, I have trouble gaining insight on in the cultural details and mechanisms on the ground that are nonetheless relevant. So,
you know, honestly, I love to hear that because that's kind of the thesis of my channel. You know what I mean, is to provide a real world example of at least one anecdotal, albeit, but a real example of at least what I think, you know, and I'm American, you know?
I thought I would look into this together with you and see what we can learn.
For whatever that's worth.
All right. Today, to warn all
oh God, there I am.
Americans, your democracy is in danger.
It is in danger. It really is in danger. People really don't understand the significance of, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to it, but one of the most significant to me is how Trump has undermined people's trust in our elections. You know, to me, that's one of the most bastard things he's done here domestically, because that might impact us for generations, even after, you know, I think we will reject them, the MAGA movement, in the next federal election, and hopefully in this upcoming midterms election. Regardless, I think that having a massive segment of the population not believe in our elections, you know, this is kind of weird. Like, I feel like I should respond, but that was myself talking. So I think he did a fine job. I don't think I need to elaborate.
Certainly, and that is precisely why Trump and his clan have done this. It is much easier to portray yourself as a populist, as a hero for your own camp, when you don't just fight a supposed great foreign enemy from the outside. It's very helpful to have a constructed enemy from the inside. Mm-hmm. The administration, the bureaucracy, whatever, or foreign agents, the migrants. And undermining trust in elections to, in fact, supplant the system.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Trump has managed to do it. I mean, he's specifically mentioned the migrants, which is, of course, I mean, true. But Trump has managed to do it, and he's referred to it as the enemy within. I mean, he's referred to it as that. The Democrats, like, as a whole, which is insane. if you really think about that. He's referred to the Democrats as a whole as the enemy within, you know?
Of rule of law.
And that they're the ones who have, rigged the elections, which could, of course, be a pretext to maybe cancel the next election. Who knows? I mean, it could be a pretext to do all sorts of insane things.
Including elections, with supplant the system of rule of law, including elections, with yourself is the whole shtick.
Right. He says, this whole election thing is a fraud. It doesn't work. We need so just you can just have me, Donald Trump. I am like God. I'm your new God. I'm far superior to a rigged election. You can trust me. Also, the irony of Trump being a populist, it's actually kind of like surprising to me, right? Because he's obviously he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth into an extremely rich, opulent family. I mean, I would have thought a populist has to say, I'm one of you, But Trump never was one of the common people. So it's actually kind of crazy that he was able to convince so many common people that he's on their side.
Fascism. Of rule of law, including elections, with yourself is the whole shtick of fascism.
It's just devastatingly bad. It's just devastatingly bad. I just realized how crazy this is. I've got his original videos in the corner of my reaction, and then he's got my video there, and my video now has its inception. Because, I mean, the thing is, what's the rational response if you truly believe your elections in your country are fake? What is the rational response? And they're under that impression because of Trump. It was a scary thought.
Let's not make one crucial mistake, though.
Ooh, okay.
There's hardly anything rational about fascism.
Right.
I know what he means, but the reaction that we have seen is hardly rational, is it?
Yes, no. Well, okay, I guess I should be a little bit more clear. Let me let him finish.
MAGA and Trump are, I would posit, not the cause of all the problems we have.
Okay, hold on. Before I lose that thought, because it sounds like he's moving on to another point. Yes, the reaction's not rational because it's based on a lie. It's based on this narrative, fake narrative that the 2020 election was rigged. So the response to that is totally irrational. But what I was more so meaning is putting yourself in those people's perspective where they've been fooled by Trump, unfortunately. And people get fooled by, all sorts of different politicians, whether it's on the left or the right, to be honest. But in this case, it certainly was Donald Trump that fooled these people into believing that election is rigged. And when you think the election is rigged, I mean, we saw the response, on January 6th, which could have been so much worse than it even was. That was like a little taste of what could happen. My point is that let's pretend the election actually was rigged. Let's pretend Donald Trump rigs the next election. What's the rational response? In my opinion, some sort of revolution is essentially a rational response. So that's the perspective these people are living under, because they've been lied to from Donald Trump that the 2020 election was rigged. So they're like, all right, it was rigged. What are we going to do? And God knows what would have happened if he had lost the 2024 election, because obviously he would have said that was rigged as well. He would have said they rigged it twice in a row. I think, I guess it was a lose-lose scenario. Either we lose by Donald Trump becoming president, or we lose because Donald Trump loses the election, tells all his supporters it was rigged again, So January 6th was in response to it being rigged the first time. Imagine the response to, oh, it's been rigged again. I think it could have been devastatingly bad, you know? I mean, civil war sounds insane, but it's on the table in that circumstance, I think. I don't know if I'm making much sense of what he originally was saying, you know? My point is, of course, fascism and is irrational. But a revolution, if the elections actually were rigged, would be a rational response. You know, some sort of revolution, some sort of something, you know. I guess first you would attempt to do it through the courts, you know, the justice system. But if that's been rigged as well, then what do you do?
The cause of all the problems
But of course, it's all a lie. It was not rigged.
have right now, they are at least one result, presumably of social.
Sorry, I think I need to go back a little bit.
MAGA and Trump, not rational, is it? MAGA and Trump are, I would posit, not the cause of all the problems we have right now. They are at least one result. Mm-hmm. Presumably.
I don't know if it's a contradiction, but I think it's kind of both. You know, I think there were seeds of these issues, you know, that resulted in Trump getting elected. But I think Trump has exacerbated the issue hugely. You know, it's amazing what one man can do. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you think about it like, I mean, we think about it in Germany's history. Without Hitler, would the Holocaust have happened? Like we can say, oh, you know, Hitler was just a symptom of the disease. But would the Holocaust have happened without Hitler? Maybe someone who knows more than me would say, yeah, it would have. Some other cult of personality dictator would have rose to power, but I don't know. So I think it's kind of both.
Are, I would posit, not the cause of all the problems we have right now. They are at least one result, presumably of social, political, economic grievances that pre-exist and predate MAGA.
Right. There definitely needs to be that type of environment for something like MAGA to rise and formulate. Which, if we want to get, I mean, in my opinion, the Democrats have made a lot of mistakes over the last 15 years. But that's not really the issues we face at the current moment, so I won't get into that.
And that will have to be sorted out if this is ever to end. But the mythos of the stolen election is really just that, and it works because there is a already willing audience that believes it. Mm-hmm. Deconstructing.
Yeah, it's amazing when you're a cult leader, you can just say anything, right? You have this audience that will believe anything you say. So you say the election was rigged, to them, they say, okay. And it's kind of an unfalsifiable claim. It's very hard to prove. I mean, it almost is philosophical. You know, it goes all the way back to, I think, therefore I am. That's the only thing you can prove 1,000%, 100%, that you know. So anything besides that, you know, you can say, no, here's the data. They say that data came from a fake, you know, source. The media, you know, look at this report. No, this report is from a fake news. You know, that's what they say. And Donald Trump has totally fostered that entire environment to undermine the media, the elections, the institutions. You know, everything is undermined. You can't trust anybody but Donald Trump. That's why, in order to get the truth, where do you go? To Truth Social. Donald Trump's social media website is called Truth Social. It's the only source of truth. I mean, you couldn't get more Orwellian. It's like he read 1984 and said, "A ministry of truth? Oh, interesting idea."
That will likely take generations, as was the case here in Germany too.
Make America great again is a right-wing populist slogan. And
You know, those words, though, my neck hurts. Don't really hit, they don't hit the same in America as they do in Germany because we have a different history and right-wing pop. I'm interested to hear what he says to this. Populism isn't even viewed as like, that's not necessarily a bad thing here in America. Because this was really my only like critique, if you could call it that. You know, like as far as if you were trying to give messaging to America, I'm not sure that that works. You know, calling it right-wing populism as if that's bad. That's how it doesn't have a bad connotation. Like, in fact, here I only say populism doesn't necessarily have a bad connotation, but also right-wing does not have a bad connotation necessarily. Now, of course, to left-wing people it does. Of course, to left-wing people, right-wing sounds bad, but to right-wing people, left-wing sounds bad. That's just the nature of left versus right. You know, that divide. In Germany, though, and I have perceived this through years of looking at German videos and German social media posts and stuff, right-wing is actually like, it has a negative connotation associated with it. Now, there's still right-wingers in Germany that don't think so or don't think it should. But among a large portion of the population in Germany, right-wing and populism is bad. Here in America, right-wing is just one of the two options. Right-wing, left-wing. Right-wing populism. I mean, populism is an interesting word, you know, in that sometimes it actually has positive connotations. I don't know about Germany, but here in America, it can. That's true.
That may certainly be true. And actually, it's a good example for the generational task that the US has ahead of itself.
Generational task that we have. Okay.
I said it just now, deconstructing fascism to turn again to a stable democracy as a country takes generations. And if
You know, maybe I'm missing the forest for the trees here, but when I still feel, I mean, what he's saying, the implication to me sounds like, okay, well, Germany went through this history, and so we found out that right-wing populism is bad. It's a bad tactic that they use. But of course, that might be just because of your perspective from German history. You know, other countries would say left-wing communism is bad. Which actually Germany, of course, with East Germany and West Germany, has a lot of history to that as well. I guess something on this maybe just gets more into like my personal political opinions, is that the left-wing versus right-wing divide is not as pertinent as the authoritarian libertarian divide, you know, or the freedom versus authoritarian. I'm very anti-authoritarian. Right-wing authoritarian, left-wing authoritarian, centrist authoritarian. I think it's all garbage. Whereas Germans, I think, from German history, have a special hatred for right-wing authoritarianism.
Deconstructing fascism to turn again to a stable democracy as a country takes generations. And if it has gotten so far that right-wing populism is not even a too negatively connotated.
That's an interesting way to put it. He says, if it's gotten so far that right-wing populism isn't negatively connotated. Whereas the way I'm looking at it is actually we haven't yet gone through that type of massive event like the Holocaust to where, that was precipitated by right-wing populism to where right-wing populism is now like inherently evil. I don't know. I feel like I'm being confusing, and also it sounds like I'm defending right-wing populism, which obviously I'm not a right-wing populist. So I don't feel like coming across that way any longer. So I'm just going to continue.
Not even a too negatively connotated word in the US. Maybe it depends where you're from exactly in the US. Then it is a good example for how deeply.
I mean, that is true. Like, if you're in Seattle or Los Angeles, then right-wing populism would have a bad connotation. Although I still think the word populism actually, not so much, but right-wing would. Just because those are left-wing places.
This kind of ideology is entrenched already in the country. Here in Germany, and I would posit that in large parts of Europe, it is certainly negatively connotated because, and here especially, we know these kinds of strategies, these kinds of talking points, the rhetoric, and we know who used them the last time around to gain power. Now it is
I'm struggling. You might notice I keep pausing. I'm thinking about saying something, but I feel like I've kind of exhausted what I think about it, and it's getting confusing. And it's getting kind of semantic, honestly, because there's aspects of that word, like right-wing populism, where it has connotations of like being anti-immigration and all these other negative things. But at its core, populism just means you are in touch with the common man and not the elite, which in general, a lot of people, including myself, I mean, that sounds good. Now, the problem is really when evil people co-opt that strategy to install fascism or authoritarianism. And they don't mean a lick of what they say. That's especially evil. You know what I mean? That's when it gets especially evil.
Who used them the last time around to gain power. Now it is the same.
I think that America, obviously we have a super strong constitution. And with the Supreme Court's ruling about tariffs this week, even though Trump is now trying to undermine it, but he really can't. And in a lot of major ways, he cannot. He'll tell you he can, but he can't. And that's a major win, you know what I mean? That gave me a lot of optimism for, that the Constitution is still standing. We still do have a semblance of balance of powers, and it's very difficult for Trump. He's done a scarily good job at undermining a lot of our institutions and co-opting them and installing, puppets, essentially, idiots to run them, loyalists. But with that said, there's a lot of safeguards in the Constitution, and it is interesting. You watched like someone like Pam Bondi, if you happen to watch any of her at the hearing, the congressional hearing, where she just, the Dow is $50,000. That's what we should be talking about. They're idiots, and that's not an accident. But man. He has put some actual morons in the leadership positions on purpose, because you kind of have to be an idiot to be a loyalist to somebody, in my opinion. If you look at another person and you say, I'm loyal to you, unless it's your spouse, then you're kind of just weak-minded. Sorry. I hope it all works out. Obviously... One obvious thing would be if Trump managed to somehow repeal term limits.
Spit it out.
Oh, okay. And make it to where he could run for a third term. That would be really bad. Of course, he's ancient at this point, so. But yeah, pretending he's not. That would be If that ever happened, because obviously that's in the playbook of any dictator, obviously. It's one of the first things they do. And of course he hasn't been able to do that because he can't do that. There's no realistic way for him to be able to do that. But if he was able to, you know, I guess, you know, when I hear myself say that, you know, I can imagine people being like, that sounds a little naive, like, and of course that anything's possible. Anything's possible. That would really, it would just be earth-shatteringly crazy if he managed to do that. It would be like, oh, okay, so this Constitution actually was just kind of a joke. It was like a suggestion that apparently you can just rip up. Be, among other things, you know, my optimism would just entirely plummet at that point.
I believe that is one of the things that America has got going for it. The optimism and the inventiveness that is part of your culture. And if there's to be a time after Trump, it will certainly do you a lot of good. For sure.
If there is to be a time after Trump, damn, that's the scariest thing I've ever heard.
It will certainly do Trump. And if there's to be a time after Trump,
if there is to be a time after Trump. Bro, don't scare me like that.
Will certainly do you a lot of good. For sure. There is one part where, from the outside at least, I would have to object, and that is when it comes to the strength of the Constitution.
Okay.
If I am blunt about this, your Constitution is horribly outdated. Ooh. And I tell Americans that all the time, because it was also no different here.
I mean, it being outdated, like, that type of argument is said super often about the Second Amendment in particular, you know. Of course, there's the Bill of Rights, which a lot of people just kind of think the Bill of Rights is like the Constitution, whereas, of course, the Constitution lays out how the whole government works, you know, how it all works. But as far as the Bill of Rights, the amendments to the Constitution, and the Second Amendment about the right to bear arms, you know, that's obviously... I mean, you struggle. It would be super interesting to hear some of the founders come back today and say what they think about it, given that the technology of weapons has vastly increased, you know. So you're not just loading a musket anymore, you know, one I want to call it a bullet, but whatever you load into a musket, I forget, lead ball at a time. You know, now you're able to rapid fire 20 bullets a second. So that part does seem outdated. But I'm trying to think of what the rest... He says it's horribly outdated, you know? I hope he elaborates.
After the Second World War, the Weimar Constitution hadn't really done us much good, or my ancestors much good, when it comes to preventing authoritarianism. Because in the end of the day, the constitution of a country is also, mostly at least, worth as much as it is being upheld by the population it is supposed to serve.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. That kind of goes back to what I just said about, you know, if he's able to just run for a third term, then I guess the Constitution's just a piece of paper that no one gives a shit about. And yes, that is the scary thing, is at the end of the day, it really is just a piece of paper, and it only matters how much we, the American people, uphold it and demand that it be upheld, you know? And right now, a scary large amount of people in the United States are just like, you know, Constitution, schmonstitution. I trust that Trump knows what to do, what's right. You know, Constitution or not. But with that said, that's mostly in terms of things that are at least slightly, that you could argue are slightly ambiguous. Whereas something like a hard term limit of 2 terms for a presidential term, that's not ambiguous. You know, if he ran for a third term, that would just be flagrantly unconstitutional. And don't get me wrong, I do know that there is a huge amount of MAGA that if he ran for a third term, wouldn't give two shits that it's flagrantly unconstitutional. But my hope and my optimism believes that surely, I mean, I hope to God, that a vast majority of America would absolutely reject that. I don't know if they would, but I freaking hope. I hope to God. I mean, I'm looking at the Weimar Constitution right now. I mean, he makes a great point. I must concede, he makes a great point, and it is a scary point. But I will say, you know, it says that the Weimar Constitution was drafted in 1919, which of course is only a decade before Hitler. So, the U.S. Constitution is very deeply ingrained in our history here in America. And it's almost like a holy text, you know, which is kind of weird. But I don't know if the Weimar Constitution had that type of reputation to it. But here in America, it's like... Now, the sad part is that a lot of people that would have said that, what I just said, that the Constitution is like the greatest thing ever, the U.S. Constitution, are now MAGA. So I can't make sense of that. I don't know, man.
And with MAGA, we have half of the population in America, perhaps somewhat less, that wants to supplant this constitution and what it's supposed to stand for with blind loyalty to Trump. However, and that is a good point, there is still the Supreme Court, and even though they pretty much handed Trump a lot of power in the last year, the decision about the tariffs is certainly a big blow in his face, and especially a blow against his scheming of basically extortion and blackmailing other countries. That will hopefully do us some good. And
what it says to me, it's super important. You know, the Supreme Court is a profoundly important institution. And it says to me they have not been co-opted by Trump. You know? You know, even though, despite the Supreme Court being comprised of 6 conservative judges and 3 liberal judges, which, of course, the judges don't have any official party affiliation. Of course, they do not. But we all know, you know, well, they were appointed by different administrations that were liberal or conservative. So we know, you know, 6 out of the 9 are conservative judges. And despite that, well, 6 out of 9 voted against Trump, and majorly against Trump. And despite Trump vehemently, almost threatening them to not do it, they did it anyway, which is a very, very important thing to me.
It is certainly coming from an institution that is foreseen in the Constitution. But as for the rest, and as for the future, you will most likely need an entirely new Constitution, just as we did. And it isn't just about writing a paper that will organize how your country is supposed to run and how it is not supposed to be run. It is about deciding what kind of country do you want.
Dude. Wow. A whole new constitution. Wow. I appreciate big ideas, you know. I appreciate big ideas. But the only way that's happening is after a civil war. For sure. 100%. That's the only way that would happen. And frankly, I don't want that to happen. So I appreciate his perspective on all that, and I agree with, like, you know, a huge amount of it. But that's I actually love the American Constitution, like, pretty much all of it. Like, I think it's so excellent. I think it's so beautiful. And frankly, if I don't trust anybody to rewrite it or make a new one here in America. I don't trust anybody. I'm trying to think of why that is. You know, why is that? Because there are, of course, aspects of the Constitution that are outdated. It was written, you know, a long time ago. But the thing is, the people back then who wrote the United States Constitution actually had integrity. You know what I mean? These were people that they did it on principle. They were acting on principle. They were uncorrupted for the most part. They were uncorrupted by all the bullshit, you know, and these entrenched political parties and money and these campaigns that are funded by billionaires, you know what I mean? It was before all that. And instead you had these intellectuals who studied all sorts of European countries and all sorts of other societies and tried to make a framework, and I think they did a pretty damn good job at making a framework for a democratic society that had balances of powers and afforded freedoms to individuals. And I just don't trust anybody to do that in the modern age. I think there's a 90% chance it would be a much worse constitution if we ripped it up and wrote a new one. I would be in favor of maybe adding some amendments to the Constitution to, for one thing, I think it should be easier to impeach and remove a president. And I think with modern technology, we can hold elections and referendums, you know, much faster than we could in the past. And I think the people of America should be able to, in a much faster way, you know, get to vote in a referendum to remove the president. I would love to see that added. And I think the founders might have even done something like that if the technology was there to do it, you know?
To be. Now that is perhaps daunting, certainly is, but it is also going to be your privilege. And optimism.
I wouldn't even trust myself to write it. You know, that's the funny thing about it. And that's why I would make I could never be a dictator, man. I don't even trust myself.
Will do you a lot of good by then.
Time to act is now.
Indeed.
History has taught us that all it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've been talking about I mean, if you watch my other channel, you'd know I've been talking about this subject a lot, and I agree, you know what I mean? The time is now, and we have to do something. We have to speak up. And while we have our freedom of speech, we've got to use it to totally reject what's going on, which, of course, I've been doing my best. Yeah, you guys will know. If I get arrested, you'll know that the freedom of speech in America is dead. What platforms I have. Of course, my platforms are nobody watches me from America, but hey, I do like to come on. I don't like watching myself say all this. I feel like I sound very pretentious, but that's just me. On here and show that this is not like a MAGA country, okay?
And actually, that matters more each day right now. So, you know, Ryan, thanks for doing that. And in fact, it doesn't really matter who...
Thank you, Jan.
...watches you, because this is a global fight. We are pretty much in the same boat. If America falls, then Europe is next. My democracy is next. And
well, you know what's interesting? I have no idea what his politics are besides this topic against fascism. And I think it's... there's a hierarchy to all this stuff, right? We can talk about how much billionaires should be taxed and stuff and, you know, the healthcare system. But first you have to tackle the authoritarianism aspect of it, and we're definitely aligned on that one.
That is not some vague fear that I have. It has happened before, and we know how it went. So, in fact, I don't really have a strong audience in Germany. You do. So, thanks for working on that. On that matter, it's worth following Ryan as well. Do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Definitely go follow this man, Jan Berkman. I think I'm saying that right. I won't lie. I asked ChatGPT, how do you say this name? Jan Berkman.
Resistance
Go subscribe to him. Link down below.
needs a lot more interconnection, especially internationally right now. I'm working on that, but it's always good to see when more people join in on this. In fact, I watched Ryan's channel repeatedly over time, but I hadn't noticed myself even that he does political content.
Oh, you just watched my meme videos, huh?
And
Thank you.
And on that note, really, it doesn't matter who you are and where you are from.
Or did you just watch me react to German Windows?
If you take up the fight against what is happening here, if you stand up and recognize this is wrong, that you do precisely what my ancestors should have done and didn't do. And really, it's the small things like that, taking the time to produce a videos like that, or talking to neighbors, creating flyers.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Jan Berkman, you probably have no idea the impact you've had. I mean, I don't know the stats as far as the geographical stats on who watched your video, but you can see it's got 500,000 views, A Letter to America. So just imagine that. Pretty incredible age we live in, you know what I mean? You reached 500,000 people, probably mostly Americans, you know, because of the title, you know, it's A Letter to America. So that's a major success on your part, okay, and your mission. It's phenomenal. Think about that. That's so many people. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then those people, you know, if you've undoubtedly sparked some influence in them, and they will speak to other people about that subject, and it will magnify. So, you know, you touched 500,000 Americans, and it will magnify into millions, which that alone is already a major part of the voting base. So, good job.
Resistance art, putting stickers somewhere, helping people who are in need of help. If we manage to concentrate a sufficient number of people in a movement like that, then we really have a shot at doing away with MAGA fascism. On that note, I will see you in the next video. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my rambling, and let's do this.
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins. Hell yeah. I already liked it. I was going to like it. I already liked it. 43 minutes long. How the hell did I take 43 minutes to react to this? 13-minute video. I'm so sorry. Thank you to the 0 people. Well, maybe Jan watched. Thank you, Jan, for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.